Good afternoon. It's me, Bonnie Gonzalez, your doula for grief. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And before I launch into the show today, I just want to acknowledge that I know a lot of you have had some time changes. So that's going to really put you a little bit off your mark for the next couple of days. So I want you to take care of you. And in light of what's still going on in the world, that it's so important that you take care of you. And let's continue to send our prayers for world peace and healing to the Ukraine and Russia crisis. And so therefore, take the very best care of you. So today we just have a really special show for you. And it's the title of it is, excuse me, The Loss of Identity. But before I move into that, I just want to recap what loss is, loss and grief. I am your doula for grief. I am here to help you, support you to navigate this state of grief. And grief is just caused by loss. And I thought I would just recap what loss is. Loss is any expected or unexpected occurrence where you cannot go back to the way things were before, as in death, divorce, loss of job, a diagnosis, a geographical move, natural disasters, also birth of a child, puberty, aging, graduation, job promotion. The list just goes on of things that can put us then into a state of grief. And grief is just a collection of normal, natural emotions that follow a loss. It can include sadness and anger, but also numbness, confusion, guilt, anxiety, and even joy. And the reason that I am truly here with this message is because in my years of being in sacred service as a nurse, a palliative care nurse, a hospice nurse, I've just seen such tremendous suffering because of the inability for people to speak freely and openly about their grief. So I am here to just paint a new picture that grief is okay. Let's bring it off the back burner. Let's return it to its rightful place in our lives, because grief is surely a transformative phase of life. There's no way you can enter grief and come out on the other side unchanged. And so today, I thought we'd just delve into that loss that surrounds identity. And it's like, who are you when the loss of who you identify as is no longer the truth of who you are? How do you mourn the loss of that which you were and embrace the truth of who you are now? And so I just have a beautiful guest that's here to speak to that, to speak to her loss of identity. And my special guest is Jacqui Love Marshall. And Jacqui really had a full career, a full career that was really satisfying with big achievements and accomplishments. Jacqui oversaw the recruiting and corporate learning and diversity for Knight Ridder, the second largest news group in the US of A. She's also been the vice president for many multiple news agencies, the Miami Herald, the Washington Post, to name two. And she has a long history of being in community service and industry leadership, active in the Links Incorporated. Jacqui holds degrees from Harvard University and Trenton State College. She also received the John D. Blauder Diversity Award from Media Human Resources, and she was named HR Professional of the Year. So help me welcome to the show, Jacqui Love Marshall. Thank you, Jacqui. Thank you so much for coming to share your story with us. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to be
Well,
quiet.
thank you. It's a delight to be here because I love you and I know this show has to be beneficial to its listeners, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it. Um,
Thank
so
you.
you asked me about this particular loss, about my identity, and I'll kind of tell the backstory. I was your typical type A, overachieving woman, black, trying to outdo everybody and do the job as best I could. And I kept getting sick. Every time I went on a trip, I would get sick. And eventually, those health issues forced me to take long term disability from the company. I'd been there, over 12 years. And I'd been working ever since I was 14. So about 30 years in HR.
Mhm.
So I had a long history and skills and knowledge in that arena. But when I went on long-term disability, I had all this time on my hands. I had to go through a period of diagnosis and all that. But then reached a point where I was free to do things. And I started calling up people since I never had time hardly to have lunches,
Right.
meet people for lunch before
Mhm.
I started calling up good friends and saying, let's have lunch, 2 or 3
Mhm.
women at a time. And we'd have such a great time and everybody would agree to meet again. And at the end of the lunch, everybody would go to their purse and pull out their card and everybody would exchange cards, networking and all that. And I realized at that first lunch, I didn't have a card anymore.
Yeah.
And that made me realize I didn't have a job anymore. I
Mm.
didn't have an identity, a professional identity anymore. People knew me as Jacqui, heavily involved with with diversity issues in the newspaper industry, and then all of a sudden, I didn't have a card. I couldn't use that identity that I had just fallen back on so naturally for years. And I realized that a lot of my whole identity was tied up in
Mhm.
my job title. I had worked step by step to climb the corporate ladder and
Yes.
kind of reached maybe not the pinnacle, but close. And then all of a sudden, that was gone. And I had to stop and think, who am I without that job, without that title, without that association? Who am I?
Mm.
And I realized I had lost my identity.
Mm. Mm.
I no, I'm still a mother. I was still somebody's daughter then, and I was still a friend, but those things had taken such a backseat to my job that and my kids were older and my parents were older. I didn't associate myself so much with those
Mm.
parts of my identity anymore. And it took me a while. It was definitely a loss.
Mhm.
I felt it. I felt sadness. I felt sorry for myself. I was a bit depressed. I even went out knowing, the kind of action person I am, and designed and ordered me some new cards. And it had
Yes.
Jackie Love Marshall, creative person, I think I put on there. And because I figured that was broad enough to run a whole truck through. And my phone number. And I gave out those cards um, for a while. I think you probably got one of them, Bonnie. But
Maybe I still have it. Um,
But I had to really think for myself, well, wait a minute. I still have all that knowledge. I still have all those skills and experience. Been working since I'm 14. I'm still a reliable, smart, hardworking person. I still have discretion and
mhm.
I'm trustworthy. So what do I do with all that
Mhm.
now? Where do I put all that?
Right. Jacqui, I just want to back up just a little bit,
Sure.
back to that first lunch. You're finishing lunch, and everybody's bidding farewell. This is before the pre-made business card.
Right.
And everybody's pulling out their cards. What went through your mind at that point? You said that you realized, oh, everybody's got a card. Was there like that? You know, there's 5 stages of grief, but we can go through that. Is there any part of that that was like, I'm devastated. I'm just shocked.
I
Did you
think it
go
was shock more than anything, because I knew these women. They were just like me in many ways in terms of being hardworking and, competitive, ambitious. And, we all respected one another. But I was in shock when we went through the card passing process. And all of a sudden, I felt, one, like an outsider, like I didn't belong anymore. I felt this real sense of almost embarrassment,
Yeah,
because
that
that
was going to be
I couldn't use that card as my entree or my, into the girls club anymore.
right,
And
right.
it was, I wouldn't say devastating, but it was pretty hard to take. It was hard to digest. And
Yeah.
nobody, what I saw in people, because they knew the reason I was leaving was health issues, serious health issues,
Mm-hmm.
was more about pity. Like all of a sudden they felt sorry for me. And that's not an emotion I handle very well. Pity,
Mm-hmm.
me self-sufficient, me, hardworking, ambitious person, to be pitied was just felt devastating. That part did feel devastating.
Mm-hmm. And Jacqui, I think what you're saying there is what so many people express when they're in grief, regardless of the cause of it, is that they worry about how they are being seen by their
Yes,
peers, by their loved ones.
right.
Sometimes that holds them back. So was that true in your case, or were you able to speak to it? To people?
Well, initially, that was definitely a major issue. We all tend to compare ourselves to one another, and I felt I could hold my own with these ladies, but then all of a sudden, I didn't feel so equal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that I still had some undiagnosed issues that were serious, I didn't kind of know what my future would be. So there was this feeling of really hanging in the air. I had this image in my head of Humpty Dumpty. I was broken. I sat on the wall. I fell off the wall. I was broken in all these little pieces, because this was not just physical. It was spiritual. It was emotional. So I was broken in these little pieces. And I thought to myself laughingly, there's a big piece or a lot of little pieces missing. So even if I glued myself back together, there'd be this gaping hole somewhere that I have to go patch up, So all of a sudden I realized, Jacqui, you got some stuff to deal with, you have to process this. This is a big loss. One of the biggest losses I've been divorced, and this felt bigger than divorce. Okay. And I also then started thinking about all the other losses. When you reach the level that I had reached in the corporation, I had lots of perks. If the people above me didn't want to go see the Heat game on the floor, or the Warriors game on the floor, they would often say, Jacqui, would you like these 2 tickets to the basketball, game? I could sit up in the corporate box. When I went on flights, I could fly first class. I could even, when I was with some of the people on my team, I could upgrade them. I would pay for it, but I would upgrade them to first class. There were all these different perks that came. I hadn't thought about those. And it wasn't that I missed those particular perks. It was just another way of feeling diminished.
Right. And what I was going to say, Jacqui, I'll make you laugh. It sounded like you were leading a baller lifestyle, that you're with the right
I was living the big life.
You got the right
all of a sudden I was like, not quite homeless, but I was definitely several rungs down on my good life,
Right. and intensifies the loss when it's such a big
it did
life.
intensify the loss.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I was grateful that the company had a long-term disability plan where I could focus on my health. I could figure out what was making me sick, so that was a positive. But it felt more even when I balanced things, it felt more like loss than gain, And then I had to go on this whole journey to figure out who was Jacqui Love Marshall now. If I wasn't this other thing, who was I? And what was I going to do with my time? What kind of new identity was I going to build for myself? And that took some time.
I was going to say that's a good segue or stopping point so that I can acknowledge some of the wonderful people that are viewing our program and that are with us. I know I saw Wayne out there. I don't remember seeing the comment, but Wayne, thank you for being here. And there he is. Howdy from Calgary. So I know it's cold up there, so thank you. And also Laura is here. And Laura had a point that she was making about comparison. There was a statement that Laura made about comparison, how we compare ourselves. Yeah, it's amazing to me how we can get so paralyzed by comparison.
Right.
And we'll talk about that as well.
And I think that to that note, Bonnie, the comparison is often self-imposed. It's not people comparing us to themselves. It tends to be us doing all of that work.
Right. And also we have Rockin' the Love. And Rockin' the Love is on New Thought Media on Wednesdays at 12 noon Pacific time, I believe. And that is Robin and Gil. And they're on with relationships. So check it out. Check it out. So, yes, I want to go back to, before we move into who is Jacqui Love Marshall now, after that, I wanted to just recap about how Rockin' the Love, Jacqui, that's so insightful. Thank you, from Robin and Bill. You were talking about triggers. And I just wanted to bring that up, that when we suffer one loss, it triggers all the other losses. It's kind of like when you're on the computer and you push that button and there's all these drop down boxes that happen. It's like something pushes that grief button, and all the griefs that we've suffered, that we've endured because of loss, just comes down. And I think that sometimes gets people, catches them off guard. They weren't expecting to have to deal with all those other losses as well. So you started to speak to that. So just wanted to ask you a little bit about moving through that when you get triggered.
Right. And it, I mentioned the things like the basketball tickets and stuff like that and the first class fare, but it was actually the even smaller things. Like I had to get new insurance, and I realized that I'd had like the Cadillac benefits plan, right? And then all of a sudden I'm like in the general population, not even that I'm the sick person that may not, a company may not even want to cover me. So there were just things like that every day another thought or some reality would show up in the mail that reminded me, oh boy, yeah, you're definitely not that person you used to be. You know, it's almost like you're back to home base and you have to start all over again. And it felt some days just overwhelming. Like, where do I go from here? Where do I go?
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you too about those days when it just feels like trying to put one foot in front of the other is almost impossible.
In my case, it was also exacerbated by, there were days I was sick a lot. So on a typical weekday, I might be sick. I might be sick 3 or 4 days. So I only had 3 days left to ponder who was love Marshall now, and sometimes even have a pity party about being sick,
Yes.
So it really, I had to actually seek some help eventually because with a therapist, because I realized that the combination of the sickness and the loss of identity together was just feeling overwhelming. It was just hard to deal with. Once I kind of had help from somebody to sort that out, I noticed one of the things I would do is I would pivot to the familiar, like, does anybody want any HR work done? I used to be a teacher. Maybe I can teach. When you work for newspapers, you get to be a pretty good writer because everybody edits your work. So could I write? And I still clinging a little bit to that old identity because I felt that was my wheelhouse and that I could function better inside of that. And over time, I've been able to free myself more from that and realize, you know what? I can do pretty much anything I want to. There are no limitations now. Nobody's going to say that's not in your job description. That's above your pay grade. I could really start to imagine myself doing things I had never imagined myself doing. And there was freedom, there was liberation that came with that. But that did not come easily.
And that's what I wanted to ask. I know you said you reached out for help, for professional help. Was that difficult to do? Because, there's still a lot of stigma around going for mental health.
Yeah, there is stigma. And when you're in the HR field, people kind of feel you have those skills already. Why do you need to go pay somebody for those skills? I often did career counseling and personal counseling with many of the employees with which I worked, and they appreciated it. But all of a sudden, I needed that.
Right, and
that was a different story.
No, I was just going to add to that is so true because of your profession. People think you already have it all together. And I know, as being a grief doula, and I was grieving over some personal issues, and someone said, "Oh, but you're a grief doula. I thought you had that." It's like, I am human, first of all.
I'm a human being first.
Being first.
A flawed human being.
And I still get to have the experience of life, of moving through life with loss and grief. So just because you're an expert in something doesn't give you a pass. You don't get a pass. So, so back to therapy. So from therapy, was that your main tool, or did you have other tools that helped you navigate those dark spots?
Another tool was volunteering, because because of the long-term disability, it wasn't what I was making before, but it was a living. I could live off of it. And I had to adjust my lifestyle down, but I could afford to go volunteer, which is something I only did maybe once or twice a year when the corporation did the whole United Way Day, or, giving financially through my paycheck. But I was able to get involved with some local community projects and use my skills that way. I started offering to do resume makeovers for people. And which was, I thought, a pretty good skill that I had, that people often need another set of eyes on their resumes. Younger people especially. And so I just started volunteering for things. And one, it gave me a sense of achievement, which I was missing too,
A sense of purpose. A lot of people talk about purpose,
but also getting things done, which to a type A person is important. And also that connection with people, because I didn't want to get isolated sitting in the house all the time. So it was great to reach out and connect with other people and help them do something they needed to get done. So the volunteering helped a lot.
Great. And Laura had a comment there about Diego, if you could bring Laura's comment back up. We can serve from the understanding of pain.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, I'm just trying to word it correctly. Serving from the understanding of pain. Pain is there, as I've always read, to get our attention. What were you able to gain or to have a different understanding around by enduring the physical?
Pain.
It bring you some insight. That's the word.
Well, one, there's lots of things, and it's not like somebody who wants pain, but if you have it, you do try to make some sense of it. And one of the things is gratitude. Even though you're in pain, look around and you're just grateful to be there and functioning. There's some days when I was grateful for that. But then I realized how much I had, how rich my life was, even in the midst of pain, that I had people who were supportive. I had a comfortable home. I was an avid reader, so I threw myself into reading. But and grateful for the opportunity to read. Like, okay, they didn't, my eyes still work. So for little things, you start to perceive differently and with much greater appreciation. The other thing about pain is you realize that on a scale of 1 to 10, unless you're dead, you still can do things,
Yes.
and you can find satisfaction in life. I'm always amazed when I see, athletes and stuff with prosthetic legs and things like that. They find that challenge forced them to find another way to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And I had to get past my ego too, because for a long time I knew I needed some help walking, but I didn't want to walk with a cane at 50 something or at 60 something. I didn't want to look like an old lady. And I had to come to a realization that if that's what I needed to get out and about, that's what I was going to do. I was not going to let my ego, in thinking about how I was perceived, keep me from doing the things I really wanted to.
And the whole pride issue getting in the way and keeping you isolated, if not anything. I wanted to go back, and Wayne had a comment just now, but I wanted to go back to when you were talking about the pain, looking around and seeing what you're grateful for. I had a patient that once, he was just always in pain, and I was always giving him medication, and just wanted to talk to him about that. And he says, you know what, when I wake up in pain, it lets me know that I'm still here.
Right.
And as long as I'm still here, I can do something about the pain, or I can still make a contribution. Yeah. So when you said that just triggered that thought. And Wayne was giving us some love. It's coming, it's gone. He's giving us some love. So yes, reach for the stars, even through our pain and discomfort. Continue. And Laura says, thank you, Jacqui, for being such an inspiration. And Jacqui truly is. She has not stopped. She's just, she's my shiro.
Oh, Bonnie.
You're
That's a lot coming from you.
I was going to say, Jacqui, it looks like we're at time, which I can never believe. Is there one last comment or statement you'd like to make about recovering from that loss of identity?
I feel like the loss really gave me a freedom, which I never had. I could still be working 80-hour weeks, if I hadn't gotten sick and lost that identity. But now I feel like I have the freedom to do so many things I never had the freedom to do before, the time, the availability. And I'm able to take advantage of opportunities and pursue dreams and goals that I carried in my back pocket, but it was like, oh, too busy, can't look at those now. And now I get to do that. And that itself is a gift. That is, not only am I here, but I have the time to
Yes.
really go for other things. And my identity now, I couldn't put it all on one card. I did so many different things that I don't need a card, first of all, but
Yeah.
two, I don't even know how I would define myself. Just
Yeah.
back maybe to that creative person.
Yes, a truly, truly creative person. And I'm just going to toot your horn just a little bit, Jacqui. I'm going to say Jacqui and I are dear friends, and we've lived in the same part of the US for a while and did go out and do things together physically. But now Jacqui's in one part of the country, I'm in another country. And she is one of those people that I can call who is filled with ideas, has nothing to do with her mobility and getting up and moving. She is just filled with creative ideas. I'm still thinking of some things that she told me 2 days ago when I talked to her, like, wow, wow, wow. So Jacqui, you're,
Thank you, Bonnie.
I feel that you don't have to dig for self-worth. Just being you, just being Jacqui.
Oh, thank you. And thank goodness the brain still works.
Yes, and it's a beautiful brain. And thank you so much. And Diego, thank you for your patience. And I just want to thank everyone for watching. And if you just took just one little piece of this conversation and put it into your life, and it's made you feel somewhat more hopeful about moving through grief, that's exactly what the purpose of your Doula for Grief is, to get us to talk about it, get it out in the open. Grief has to be talked about. So thank you so much, Jacqui. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for being you, Bonnie.
Big love. All right. Thank you. Until next week. Next week, we will have another exciting guest on how we hold grief in our bodies, our physical responses to grief. So you're not
I'll be listening for that one.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. And don't forget to ask yourself, what do I need today? What do I need today? And honor that. So thank you. Until next week. Ciao.
Bye.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.